Codie Sanchez, if you're not familiar with her empire, she teaches people how to build wealth through buying businesses. So she has a financial media company where she teaches people this, but she also has like a holding company that owns multiple businesses generating, I have heard, over $50 million a year in revenue. And so I know from my own entrepreneurship experiences and also buying and selling companies that so much of the game is about working with your relationship with risk. And so Codie, today I want to talk to you about risk.
I like it. Let's do it.
Okay. Do you think you are naturally a risk taker, or did you like develop that through like environment or like places you worked?
I actually hate risk. I hate risk so much that I stayed in a corporate job for like 12 years. You know, like you and people like you who go out and just become an entrepreneur. I know you have a bit of a corporate background too. So
Yeah,
like
I do.
you get
I
it.
have some.
You get it too, but most people who are entrepreneurs don't stay at corporate for like a decade. And so I actually hated risk. I would get comfortable with the risk of like changing jobs or taking harder jobs. But I always really looked up to the people who would do the crazy thing and come up with some idea and try to create it in full spectrum and like do it while not having a salary. I was like, what's wrong with you people? That sounds terrible. You know?
Yeah. It's crazy. There's a little craziness in there.
There's a lot of crazy. And I think, the bummer about entrepreneurship today that we know to be true is it's hard. Like 90% of us fail in the first 10 years. And like, we know those statistics, like they're in the ether, but then, we go do it anyway. And we're like, the thing is, I'm the 10%. And you're like, probably not. I'm probably not the 10%. Right. And so, I think that I had to cultivate getting comfortable with risk, and I had to like get pushed out of not one but two companies before I finally was like, I better fucking just bet on myself because nobody else will,
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Even though I did have a corporate stint, and some of it was a little bit more startup-y, which I think gave me that startup bug. So when I worked at Foursquare, I like realized like, oh, I love this startup environment. It was a little bit more of a bridge for me. But when my last job that I had, which was over a decade ago, I was working at Microsoft, and Microsoft laid off a bunch of people, which then really propelled me to make that move. I'm not sure I would have even done it without that push, because you're right, like it's a scary thing to do, to just make that jump. There's something about buying a business though, that do you see that as more or less risky than just starting from scratch?
Yeah, well, if you would have asked me that question when I was working, I'd be like, what the fuck wrong with you with that question? That's the dumbest question ever. Of course it's more risky to buy a business, right? And then I started looking at the numbers and I was like, listen, most startups fail 90% within the first 10 years. And most of that's front loaded, like 60% fail within the first 3. And you look at people who buy a business and we look at getting loans, let's say from the SBA, well, only 25% of SBA loans fail over the worst 10-year period. The best 10-year period, it's like 5 or 7%. And so, the odds just tell us that it is less risky to take over a business that is already cash flowing. Now, what I think is true is, I don't know if you felt this way about being like a woman, let's say in particular, but I thought that I needed so many credentials to be taken seriously and, to go very far. Like I have an MBA and I have a PhD and I went to Georgetown and I worked at Goldman and I did all the things that like that was the highest level you could go was Goldman back in the day. You're a little younger than me. Like the highest level you could go would be a Silicon Valley backed startup, right? That was like the thing. And so in retrospect, I'm like, man, if I could tell young Codie anything, it would be, you don't need so many certificates. Like, let your work speak for itself. Go buy a business. Just make sure it's not huge. So if it fails, it doesn't ruin your life. And like, you're going to learn so much more from that than your MBA, than your next certificate, than a PhD. Like, it's just not as useful,
There's a stage of life for all of us though, because what you're saying really resonates with me. Like I think there was a point where there were just decreasing marginal returns of like, we went to Columbia, worked at Google, you worked at like, okay. So I think though, that there is, if you look at like Maslow's extended hierarchy of needs, that the need for like the esteem needs, the recognition, that like, look at me, I'm doing the things that are like on the path I'm supposed to do. At some point you probably go like, okay, but what about the things that are exciting and fulfilling to me? And for those of us who are entrepreneurs, there is this element of like this desire to take a risk, to try something in some capacity, that there's a place where you lean into that. So that really resonates with me. When you think about your shift, though, from corporate to entrepreneurship, did it occur to you as you taking a really big risk? And how have you shifted your relationship with risk over time since then?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think about it like wading slowly into a pool, one step at a time. You know how there are like two types of people? There's my husband that's like, rip the Band-Aid off, jump in, and he just goes. And then I'm like, not on your life. I'm going to take one step at a time, and I might go up to my waist, and then I'm going to like stress about it for a while and go under, and then I'm going to remember that as soon as I'm under, it like feels better. But that's like just not my way. I'm going to go slow. And so I think that's okay. People have made us entrepreneurs out to be these risk junkies, and I don't think you have to be. Like, you don't have to sleep on your couch. You don't have to start in a garage. You don't have to almost lose everything. You can do all those things, and that could happen to you, and that sucks, but it's not like the prerequisite on the way to making it. It is really hard. Don't get me wrong. There will be like sleepless nights, but like, I don't think you have to set yourself up for so much misery. And so I wish I would have known that when I was younger. And if I could, you know, if I was talking to somebody today, and I guess I am, because lots of people do this path now with our students and community, I'm like, man, you know, I didn't do my first deal until I was probably 8 years into finance, something like that, maybe 9 years into finance.
Okay.
And I had learned how to do deals. I had done dozens of deals by then. I had money. I was making 7 figures. I had money. I knew how to do deals, but I still didn't do them for years. Why? Did deals just not exist prior to that? Were they just not around? No. But one of my mentors said something to me that always stuck with me, which is, he said, your opportunity will always be limited by your ability to recognize it. And I was like, that's annoying, but true, you know? And so the truth of the matter is, there were all these opportunities around me, but I just couldn't tell because I didn't know how to look for it. And so now I think a lot about why I'm screaming all the time on the internet is that I think you need to turn on your reticular activating system. You need to tell your brain that this thing is important to you. And once you do that, your brain starts to go, wait a second, like your dad's best friend is kind of older. His kids don't want to run that advertising agency that he runs. But you like it. Why don't you talk to him about that? You're in advertising. Could you take over that business? And you'll never think that way until you read a book like this or until you start listening about doing deals, because they're all around you. You just can't see them. It's like this hidden stealth wealth.
Yeah, I'm almost hearing you say that it's not even really about getting more leaned into risk. That's not the first thing you need to do. The first thing you need to do is sort of broaden your lens to see opportunity, which of course is connected into a conversation about risk, but it's really about like seeing the opportunity for you to do something else. What's the other side of that? Because like we talk so much about like the rewards you get from like seeing opportunity and risk, but there's also like a psychological cost. I'm thinking about like the highest stakes deal that you have done thus far. Like what has been the like psychological cost of that? I'm assuming you have times where you're like up late trying to solve the problem. And what does that look like for you?
Yeah. One of my other favorite mentors, Bill Perkins, said to me the other day, he was really funny. He's like, I was complaining about something. We have a lot of businesses now, so something's always going wrong in one of the businesses. And it's
always a fire.
Always a fire. And he was like, you do realize you have zero risk, right? I'm like, excuse, like what do you mean I have zero risk? I have a lot of risk. He's like, no, you don't. He goes, are you going to be homeless? Are you going to go starving? Are you going to never be able to earn again? Can you not take care of yourself? And I was like, well, no. He's like, literally worst case scenario, you would go, let's say worst case scenario, like everybody you know hates you, you lose all contacts somehow, which is totally unreasonable to think. You could go become a bartender, work your tail off, and probably make $75K a year if you were hardcore about it. So if you could do that, then the only risk you have is ego risk. You have ego risk. And the ego risk is on a relative basis. You do not want to lose your relative standing versus your peers, which is so true. So most of us today who have, anything that we've accomplished in life, we just don't want to go backwards. We're so scared about going backwards. But I try to think about risk now, kind of like, do you remember when Elon Musk had that Tesla? And I can't remember if he fired a bullet at it or threw a rock or something. It was supposed to be bulletproof and it broke. And
I do remember this. In front of everybody, yes.
In front of everybody. And he's like, I guarantee you that it will not break. And then it broke. And I look at his response sometimes, and it's what I try to think about with risk, is he laughed. He literally laughed and was like, well, that didn't work. And I aspire to be that same way. Like, I'm trying my damnedest, but sometimes we're just going to fail. And don't get me wrong, there are very dark nights where things go really wrong. And it's scary, but the only thing really at risk is that I'm worried about what other people will think of me. And I think that's a real luxury for most of us who are probably listening to this podcast. And I try to remember that.
That's a really interesting point. I'm thinking about my own scenarios across my entrepreneurship journey of the up late, restless, what's the solution to the problem, racking my brain. And when I was early in my entrepreneurship journey, I used to do this thing where I would tell myself over and over again, okay, well, if it all else fails, you just go back to Google, which is a very privileged place to be in, right? But I used to have to tell myself that to really get at, I think, what you're trying to say right now, which is it's not actually that bad. There are things I could go do if it didn't work out. But I don't think I've done a great job, as I get to different levels of financial wealth and just career placement, I don't think I renew that statement. And so the Elon Musk one is a whole nother level, I think, of my ego is just if I do the demo and it doesn't work, I just laugh. But I think at each stage of success, maybe there's a version of that. Do you have an earlier version for you? Right now it's the Elon Musk vision. What was an earlier version of that?
I remember I am very fueled by my haters. I was laughing. Somebody was like, why'd you write this book? I'm like, for all my trolls, and it's kind of partly true. I think there's a little chip on my shoulder that I remember the first boss I had when I left that company and was going to go to another one. And he was like, well, come back when it doesn't work out. I was like, when it doesn't work out? I'm like, I'm going to fucking remember this. And so, what I go back to is every time I'm struggling and there's a night where I really don't think I'm going to figure things out, we're going to lose all our money and everybody's going to hate me.
Which probably won't happen.
Yeah, it doesn't sound reasonable, but that is sometimes where my mind goes. I think back about that and I allow the reality to be what it is, which is, maybe that worst case thing could happen. But I remember that hater and I go, I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure he's not right. And no matter what happens, I'm not going back there. I'm going to the next step. And so lots of people, my therapist would probably be like, this is not great advice for the internet, Codie. But I think that those really hard things that happen to you in life, you can actually see as a gift. I am so glad that I had a boss that told me, in the book, this shows you the level of my degradation of psyche, but the very first little page at the bottom, it's nice, sweet thing. And then it's behind every successful entrepreneur is a bad former boss. So I also dedicate this to that boss you hated. You know which one. Thanks, bud. Wink. And because I want to remember that. And they say most people don't leave jobs, they leave bad bosses. And so I don't go to I'm going to be okay. I go to I'm going to prove that guy wrong. And that's how it works.
I really like the way that you are talking about and thinking about hacking and working with your subconscious, because so much of this is wrangling that. And if the subconscious driver is screw this person, I'm going to do something else, you can at least take that and use it and funnel it for good. I think I spend a lot of time on this of working on the narratives that are running in the back of my head that I don't have full consciousness with. Have you ever done hypnotherapy or anything like that?
No, but we do. What do we do? We do. Oh gosh, it's Gabby Bernstein just wrote a new book on it. It's called Self Help. The book's really good. Plug for Gabby, but it basically it's like I don't know. This sounds so Austin, Texas right now. Don't judge me, people. But it's
I'm
like
here for it.
Okay, good. It's like inner child, like the different parts of you, and so you're talking to like this part versus that part. I don't know. She asks you like, how do you
your
feel
character
deep inside?
work. Yeah.
Okay, so you're enlightened. Every time she does it, I have to.
I'm
like,
all
giggle
here for
and
the
pull
woo-woo.
myself
Yeah.
back. Okay, you are. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
I think I developed a relationship with my woo-woo because I had to, in some of the stuff that you're talking about. Like, I remember, I was probably 2 years into my entrepreneurial journey, and we had like a week where I made $100,000 in revenue that week. And I was like, oh, I want to go get my nails done, but I can't get my nails done because it costs too much money. And I was like, girl, we have to work on this. There's something that needs to be done here. And so that was like an awareness and a wake up call for me. And hypnotherapy became really helpful for me because obviously consciously I'm aware that I can afford to get my nails done, but subconsciously something else is running back there. And I was really clear that that was going to get in the way of my relationship with risk, my ability to make decisions moving forward. And so like when you do hypnotherapy, the guards that are like at the metaphorical guards at the door of your subconscious, they go on break, and you're able to work on stuff that's not necessarily conscious but at a subconscious level, and it's like really been impactful for me. So for you've done some like character work. Is there a character of Codie that is more risk adverse than others?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, two things. One thing that I thought that was interesting that you talked about is, do you think that part of the reason why you do like cool makeup and cool nails now is like to remind yourself you can? Is that like, have you grown to like it?
It's part of my character work, actually. So I think it's like I get to step into the next version of myself. I think like and I can also like trace back and look at this history of the things I was trying to step into next. I think right now, for example, I'm really looking to embrace more of my like weirdness and quirkiness and artistry that I think I kind of like put away because there's like a way that like a businesswoman is supposed to look that I took on, right? And I think I'm missing out on lots of opportunity for myself by not leaning into that. And so for me, I really love fashion and design, and so those are ways that I can like lean into next character or version of myself. That's kind of how it looks for me.
Well, I love that because, I actually never cared about what I looked like in business. And I think that was also like programmed. We are all a series of pre-programs, right? That either are subconsciously or consciously wired. And my programming was like, we show up in suits to work, minimal makeup. It's like that, very demure, very cutesy. Like that was the way it was done back in the day. And no color, and I was always kind of a little curvy and Latina, and so I like cut my hair real short. Not a good look for me. I have really big hair, so it was like the whole thing was bad back in the day. And I think it's only been like a year where I've kind of gotten into clothes, and I'm like, I could wear my leather pants, and I could wear my pink jacket, and I can be like, fuck it, it has nothing to do with anything, and I could be feminine or I could be sort of masculine, and it's all good. But what's interesting?
Because you're both.
Exactly. Well, we all are, right? And
we all are.
This week I was looking at a study that was fascinating about how, on average, pretty privilege is real. So there's a bunch of studies out there that show that when they went out, especially for women, and they looked at women who had asymmetrically similar faces, the same expertise and career and salary level, when they wore makeup, just makeup as the differentiator, they made 30% more money from this privilege of makeup. How wild is that? And then when you look at men who all other things being largely within a margin of error equal, but wore a suit, same type of job. So this isn't a trade worker versus a white collar worker. They made 15% more money. And so whether we want to say it or not, whether it's PC or not, the way we present ourselves really matters. And so I think it was reasonable for you and I back in the day to say, you know what, I better not dress this way because I'm going to be taken less seriously. But I think we got it a little wrong because it's actually just we are projecting something, And we have to be conscious of what that projection is. You can be weird and artsy, but beautifully pulled together and executed well. And that can be really powerful. You can be very demure and standard looking, and that could be very, very powerful. But like, you should control and project whatever narrative you want to, and just know that numerically it has impact.
No, that really resonates. And like, I remember in like early in my career, like there was a point where I combed out my dreadlocks and like straightened my hair because I thought that was the thing that you were supposed to do in corporate. And even when you look at the people, when I would look at, I think what turned this around for me was I looked at the people who are more senior, women who are really senior. Even in like, there was a quick stint where I was going to go into finance route and then moved into tech. And even in finance, I remember at JP Morgan, there would be like the women that were most senior, they were fly. They had their look. Maybe it wasn't like crazy colors, but there was more personality and they brought themselves to work than maybe the men were. And so I think that's always, it was more the junior women who were like, I have to only wear the black and the suits. Like the more senior, they had a thing going on for them.
That's I actually really resonate with that. You know, I'm watching right now the season 2 of The Diplomat. I don't know if you haven't watched
seen it. Okay, it's okay. Tell me about it.
I'm into politics. It's good, but basically it's a female ambassador, and she's kind of a mess. Like, she doesn't really dress very well, but she's a pro. She's incredible, and she meets the vice president of the United States, and the VP is also a pro, serious, but talks a lot about image and what she projects and why she wears what she wears, and I thought it was powerful because I feel like for a while there we couldn't talk about it, but the VP is incredibly powerful, and yet the way that she dresses is beautiful. She's got like this serious bob. It's kind of, you know, it's very specific, and so like, Lord, look at who the richest women are. I mean, well, the number one richest woman in the world who's self-made, fascinating, is a roofer, which is wild. So, from a roofing company. But our modern day equivalents are Taylor Swift, massive focus on brand. Kim Kardashian, massive focus on brand. I mean, the women who have created a ton of wealth these days actually know the power of understanding the deal. You got to understand the finance side, but also projecting a certain thing.
Yeah, I think this actually ties nicely into the conversation we're having about seeing the opportunity, or taking a risk, which first requires you to see the opportunity. And I think one of the opportunities for women is to, like, in being yourself, like, women are naturally, if not anything else, like, expressive, right? We're very good at expressing ourselves, whatever that looks like. Right. And so I think, like, leaning into just who you are and how you want to show up is a good way to do that. Now, we're talking a lot about, like, the mindset needed around, like, entrepreneurship and buying a business, but I want to have a quick segment where we talk about, like, the tactics of this. So if someone wants to buy a business, Codie, and they want, instead of like starting a business, they want to buy one, like, what are kind of the, like, bullet point steps they need to take to do this?
Yeah. Well, the first thing you need to do if you want to buy a business is you have to believe that it's actually possible. I think this is the first limiting factor for just about everybody.
Right.
You have to talk yourself out of what most women do, which is that sounds too big. Women, by and large, in my opinion, we play it smaller than the men do. And that's a real bummer. And this is we've taught 3,000 students how to buy a business. And I see it frequently. The best women at buying businesses are, like, dare I say, better than the guys sometimes. But the majority of women don't actually believe that they're capable of doing it, and they do too small of deals. And so that is the one thing I am always pushing us on. I don't believe there's really a lot of gender difference between, like, it doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman to buy a business. It's a great equalizer. Like, nobody has to promote you one way or another. You could buy any type of business, so it could be for whatever type of human. But I do find that you got to go bigger than you think, and you have to believe that you're able. Then after that, the cool thing about buying businesses is there's a very specific playbook to doing this. And it starts with that reticulator activating system, turning on, looking for deals around you. And the second step that's really, really important is figuring out, what do you want out of a business? We don't buy a business for passion. We buy a business to make money, at least the way that I do it. So it's like, if you want to make more money, then I want you to buy a business that is already cash flowing, that has enough money to pay you, an operator to work with you, operating cash for the business to keep running, and enough money to pay for however you're going to finance the business, a loan, seller financing, etc. And so I want
and
you to
have a
define,
platform where people can find businesses to buy, correct? It's BizScout, bizscout.com.
That's right. Yeah, I try to practice what I preach. We bought that business, and then we're scaling it. Yeah,
very nice.
So we can help people buy businesses for sure, but then we got to help people find businesses. And the last thing I'll say is, like, I just want people to know, you don't have to be so overwhelmed with the steps. There's like 10 steps to doing a deal that private equity guys follow. And if you follow those 10 steps, it is possible for just about any human who's willing to take the grit of entrepreneurship, which is no small thing, to execute.
Okay, and also, like, what I'm hearing you say about, like, getting a business that's cash flowing. If I go look, for example, like businesses that are on BizScout, it'll tell you what the revenue is, what the profit margin is, what the cash flow is. And as you kind of analyze, like, okay, does this make sense for the investment? You can kind of run the numbers on that and make decisions yourself. But I'm hearing you say, before you even dive into that, there's a mindset thing to do about seeing opportunity and not playing too small.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we call it our deal box. So basically what you want to do is, you know how, like, with dating, you would go and say, like, I want a guy that's, I don't know, does this, is into this religion, 6'5", trust fund, blue eyes, whatever the fuck women want these days. I've been married too long.
I have a spreadsheet.
Yeah, no, you don't.
I have a spreadsheet, and everybody gets a column. It's mainly to, like, hold myself accountable. Like, are you just excited, or does this actually match anything you're looking for? So yes, I do understand what you're saying.
Okay, so actually, our deal box looks a lot like a spreadsheet. So
it's like my dating spreadsheet.
Yes, that's hysterical. So anyway, so you fill out your little spreadsheet of what you want. And there's really 15 characteristics that matter in buying a business. And then you'd go on a site like BizScout, and there's not very many things you have to look at in the beginning. You have to look at really 4 things for a business you want to buy. And the first one is, how much money do you want to spend? So what's the valuation of the business? How much money you want to make? How much profit is in the business? Is the business located somewhere near you if you're buying a brick and mortar business? I like the first one to be. And is the valuation of the business reasonable compared to its profits? That's kind of like the first screen. So on BizScout, you'd look through those 4 things and say, like, all right, I don't want to pay more than $1 million. This business is only $100K. Okay, great. I want to make at least $20K in my first business. This business profits and margins is $50K. Okay, that's great. The business is actually located in my neighborhood. It's a small flower stand. Okay, cool. And the business has the ability to be reasonably multipled because it's only 2x. So if I make 50% profit and I pay $100K, I'm paying 2x the profit for the business. That's reasonable. And so at least you could screen that first business, and then you could dive deeper. You could go on your first date with the business, basically.
And start making a spreadsheet. The first date is like a conversation, a Zoom or phone call with the owner.
Yeah.
Or in person if it's near you.
I think that, so how it usually goes in business buying, I've actually never talked about this out loud, so this is interesting. So how it typically goes, I would think, is you first fill out your deal box, high level. Then you say those 4 things you really care about. Then you go to a site like BizScout, you look at it and you say, hey, this one looks good. So that would be like, hey, I'm swiping left or right, or whatever way is yes on those dating apps. I say, yeah, this one's interesting for me. It fits my 4 things. Then you're going to reach out to the owner of the business or the broker, and you're going to ask for more information, because before you even go on the first date, you want more info on the person. In this case, you're going to fill out your deal spreadsheet a little bit more. And you're going to say, okay, here's the financials of the business. Here's a little bit more background information on the business. Here's its tax returns. It's looking pretty good for my deal box. And at that point, you might want to reach out and have a phone call with the broker and say, hey, I'm more interested. Can we get a little bit more serious? And then in the book, we outline the process, but there's this seller engagement process, which is where you start saying, all right, step 1, coffee date, step 2, deep dive, step 3, visit the property, etc.
Okay, so to wrap up this conversation, I want to hear a little bit about your book and about just sort of where people can go to learn more about the process, not only of understanding the relationship with risk and the subconscious psychology around it, but also tactically what to do.
Yeah, well, the book is really one idea, and that is the idea that anytime you can have, like, I bet people on here remember, like in 2008, I was in finance, and the stock market had crashed, all-time lows, right, across the board, 2008, 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
Everything is on sale. And I remember my chief economist at the time saying to me, somebody asked him in the audience, they asked him, hey, what stock should we buy? And he said, yes. Yes.
All of them.
The stock market is so low, the answer is yes. Now, if you would have asked the question 5 years later, it was like, well, there's more nuance to that because the stock market had come up quite a bit. I think right now, over this next, let's call it 5 to 10 year period, we are going to have so many businesses for sale that as long as you do the transaction intelligently, we are going to look back in 10 years from now and be like, we will never have gotten deals like we got today. And so I wrote this book because, one, I do want more people to be rich. I think our world is better if more people have more. We're more giving, we're more abundant. Second, I think it's a tragedy every time a business closes down. And it's one of my life missions for no entrepreneur to have gone through the horrible, horrible, hard truth of having a business that was successful, that was created out of pure grit and nothingness, and then have a profitable business shut down. Why? Yeah. What should happen instead is somebody should buy that business, even if it's just for a percentage of future profits. So there are about 11 million of those small businesses around the US and Americas today, and I think they are waiting for owners to learn enough to be able to buy those businesses and run them. And that's sort of my mission, is to pair those two people together.
Amazing. Okay. This is so helpful, Codie, just hearing about what tactically to do, but also what to do from a mindset perspective. And I think folks are going to really love hearing this from you.
Yay. Well, thank you guys for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, of course.